Antarctica might seem like nothing more than a frozen wasteland, but hidden beneath its ice lies a world of bizarre and unsettling mysteries, some so strange they're hard to believe and others so terrifying they can't be ignored. From unidentified creatures to ancient secrets buried deep in the ice, here are 20 of the strangest things found in Antarctica that still leave scientists uneasy to this day. Number 20. Tunnels discovered under Antarctica. Now, finally, we do have something that could be about aliens. Well, sadly, no. These are the unusual but still terrestrial tunnels beneath the ice layer in Antarctica. These are some really huge tunnels that in places are as tall as the Eiffel Tower. They were first discovered by radar that was mounted on planes and flew over the area, along with satellite photography which showed that there appeared to be tunnels below the ice layer. It turns out that these tunnels were not built by some secret alien army that lives underneath the ice, nor was it some ancient and long-lost structure. Oh no. These tunnels are actually a natural phenomenon which are formed by the melt water flowing underneath the layer of ice and over the land and out into the sea. Kind of like any old river, but in this case, instead of traveling into a place underneath rock forms, it travels beneath ice. There you go. Mystery solved. You can all go home now. Number 19. Mysterious hole in Antarctica. Sometimes the winter ice that covers the surface of the Weddell Sea in Antarctica forms an enormous hole. Back in 2016 and 17, just such a great big hole appeared, and it got all the scientists especially excited. It seems as though these holes do occasionally appear in the massive big ice that covers most of Antarctica. Even bigger ones had apparently appeared there several decades before. But with all the snazzy new technologies that are available these days, scientists had the opportunity to really examine and monitor the movements like never before. They used satellite imagery, robotic drifters, and even some of those seals that they fitted with sensory equipment to keep watch over the shifting ice. Here he comes. They concluded that these holes could appear as the result of several different phenomena. These were things like unusual conditions in the ocean and some very intensive storms that had formed over the area which had displayed almost hurricane levels of wind. Well, whoever knew that ice holes were so very exciting. Number 18. Pyramids found beneath the ice. They seem to be keeping a whole lot of different stuff down there underneath the Antarctic ice sheet. This time we are apparently looking at an entire mountain range that happens to be located under all of that ice. What a fun one this is. So then how did this happen? Are not mountains meant to poke out above things? Well, usually yes, but it seems that things are all generally going on slightly differently there in Antarctica now, doesn't it? Anyways, this is an absolutely massive mountain range. It is approximately 9,000 feet tall and runs as far as 750 miles long. Except despite the size, you can't actually see the mountains. That's because they are all buried under 2,000 feet of ice in East Antarctica. Even though these mountains are believed to be as big as the Alps, they're essentially invisible, which is kind of weird. This particular mountain range is named the Gamburtsev Mountain Range after the Soviet geophysicist Grigory Gamburtsev. So that's all very jolly for him, I'm sure. In 2016, some photographs were taken in the freezing cold icescape of Antarctica, which appeared to show a pyramid-like structure. Now, this in and of itself was kind of cool, whatever it may have been. But when some people saw it, you know exactly what they said. Yes, aliens. I mean, how else could there be a pyramid in Antarctica? Well, there was other speculation for a while that maybe some boring old people had once lived there and they built the pyramids like the ancient Egyptians and all of that sort of thing. But that was just too boring of an answer and everyone really wanted it to be aliens. So, when a big party pooper came along and studied it and all properly used equipment and such, well, they really spoiled the conspiracy theorist shindig. According to all of the actual evidence, this is not a man-made thing or indeed alien-made structure at all. It is in fact just the peak of a mountain poking out of the snow that looks a bit like a pyramid. Or is it? If you wanted to hide the existence of aliens, that's exactly what you would say now, isn't it? Number 17. Colorful icebergs. The icebergs of Antarctica and Greenland actually contain most of the Earth's fresh water. This stuff forms the ice caps that are essential to the balance of life on Earth. And as well as their extremely valuable and essential job of regulating our planet's climate and storing water, icebergs can also be surprisingly beautiful. These striped formations in the ice are caused by several different factors. Blue stripes can be the result of a crevice in the ice sheet being filled up with water and then freezing quickly before any bubbles have formed. Green stripes are often the result of what happens when an iceberg falls into the sea and algae-rich water freezes in a layer on its bottom. When these icebergs flip over, it can show all kinds of extraordinary green shaded stripes. The other colors that can turn up in icebergs are black and brown and yellow, and they're generally the result of sediment that is picked up by an iceberg when it slides downhill on its way towards the sea. This beautiful phenomenon is seldom seen because, as you know, most of the cool stripy stuff tends to be hidden beneath the surface of the water. What we see is just the tip of the iceberg. Number 16. Ancient sea monster. When a bunch of scientists from Argentina's National Scientific and Technical Research Council were poking about at the most northerly tip of the continent of Antarctica, and I got to dig it out, that's when they found the most surprising thing. A great big load of old bones. These weren't just any old bones, though. This was the skeleton of a plesiosaur. These were marine reptiles with very long necks that were around all the way back in the late Triassic period, which was about 200 million years ago, and then were widely found throughout the Jurassic era, which was approximately 150 million years ago. Although they had found some smaller fossils over the years, this was by far the biggest and oldest animal fossil that Antarctica had yet offered up. It is especially unusual because it had previously been thought that the types of rock in this region were not any good at the preservation of bones. So, it has all been rather exciting and led to a huge push to keep hunting for more dinosaur fossils in the region after all. Now it's time for today's topic. In January 2025, a joint expedition between National Geographic and the British Antarctic Survey made a chilling discovery deep within the frozen wilderness of Antarctica. While drilling ice cores near the Filchneron ice shelf, researchers stumbled upon a massive form encased beneath nearly 6 feet of solid ice. When the ice fractured, the outlines of a nightmarish creature were revealed. Its gaping mouth filled with rows of serrated teeth, its body stretching longer than a school bus. The frozen specimen appeared to be a predatory marine creature unlike anything catalogued before. Its features bore unsettling similarities to both prehistoric sharks and deep-sea abyssal fish, leading some paleobiologists to speculate it could be a relic from the Cretaceous period, perfectly preserved by the Antarctic freeze. National Geographic leaked a handful of photographs before quickly retracting them, sparking widespread speculation online. Scientists on the scene reported that the ice around the carcass was unnaturally fractured, as though the creature had been moving before the sudden freeze. While officials have remained silent, whispers from within the expedition suggest that samples were quietly flown to a classified research facility. If this creature once swam beneath Antarctica's waters, experts warn it may not have been alone, and some believe others could still be alive in the dark subglacial lakes below. Number 15. The singing ice. Now, weirdly, scientists have discovered that the ice shelf in Antarctica makes music. Well, not music in the sense that you and I generally understand it as, but it does make a sound. The sounds that the ice shelf is making have been recorded by seismic sensors. The frequency is not actually audible to human ears and has been determined to be an almost constant singing at about 5 Hz in cycles of 5 seconds. The song also apparently changes in response to things like storms and the melting of the ice. It's all kind of spooky. Number 14. Lost continents beneath Antarctica. Antarctica is essentially millions of square miles of ice that sits underneath snow. And then underneath of all that really cold stuff, there's a whole bunch of dirt and rocks like any other continent. It's just much more chilly. So, if there were a way to peer beneath the layers, that is what we would see. And apparently, we have the sort of technology which allows us to do precisely that. A group of researchers from Germany's Kiel University and the British Antarctic Survey have been examining a whole lot of data that was from the GOES satellite that belongs to the European Space Agency. It used gravity images to determine the shapes of the Earth beneath all the layers. These images have allowed those scientists to see clearly what is below the surface in ways that they had never been able to achieve before. Now this means that they have now plotted an entire array of land masses beneath Antarctica, what has been dubbed Lost Continent. They have seen the mass of folded-up tectonic plates at the stage before they become mountain ranges, as well as these things called cratons, which are essentially the core areas of those tectonic plates. This is all extremely useful in understanding how the continent of Antarctica formed, and it has allowed the scientists to make accurate predictions of how it will change in the future given the present melting of the ice in the Antarctic region. Number 13. Mount Erebus. Mount Erebus is Antarctica's second highest volcano next to Mount Sidley, but it is the highest active volcano in the region. This place is fascinating not only for its unique position as one of the only active volcanoes on the continent, but also as the place where it is possible to see a long-lasting lava lake on planet Earth. Every once in a while, that volcano will barf out more lava from its crater at 3,794 meters above the sea level. This volcano is different from others elsewhere on the planet. Its magma contains very little water, but it's actually rich in carbon dioxide. So, the dryness of the magma allows it to travel much closer to the surface than volcanoes which are rich in water. These sorts of volcanoes are much more rare, so there is considerably less known about them and plenty still left to study. More examinations of the whole site have been taking place in recent years and much data has been gathered on what's actually going on inside of the volcano and lower down inside the earth below. The study has discovered that volcanoes that have more water in their composition can actually be much more volatile than ones like Erebus that is carbon dioxide based. The water in volcanoes is actually what causes much more dangerous events as it can suddenly bubble up and saturate the magma, and that can cause an explosion like that of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Number 12. Ice fish colony. As we've seen over and over and over again in our videos, the deep ocean is just a bit of a mystery. and there's so much going on down there that is yet to be discovered. So when you combine the deep ocean with one of the coldest and most inhospitable places on the planet, it should come as no surprise that things here in the freezing Antarctic seas are still being revealed. Like this surprising breeding colony of about 60 million fish in the Weddell Sea. Beneath the ice, there's apparently plenty of fish who are thriving and living their best lives, breeding and everything. This ecosystem was previously unknown until about 2022, but has revealed itself to be as big as the entire surface of Malta. The fish that make up this colony are ice fish with see-through skulls and transparent blood. These fish have developed a clever adaptation in order to survive at such incurably low temperatures. They have an antifreeze-style protein in their clear blood which prevents ice crystals from forming. It's all rather clever. Number 11. Lake Vostok. This is Lake Vostok, which is actually a subglacial lake lying beneath the surface of Antarctica. Lake Vostok is one of the largest subglacial lakes, at least that anyone knows about, on the planet. It sits miles beneath the surface at Russia's Vostok station towards the east of the Antarctic ice sheet. This is a place that all kinds of surprising organisms have been found. Despite the extreme temperatures and the seemingly hostile conditions to life, some things do actually live here. And the coldest temperatures in the world have been recorded at the Vostok station. On the 21st of July of 1983, the mercury dropped to a staggeringly brisk -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a distinctly chilly -89.2 degrees Celsius. It is an oddity that liquid water can exist to form a subglacial lake, but it does. And this is because of geothermal heat that's down there. That's actually sufficient to raise the temperature to around 27 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still below freezing. But when combined with the pressure of the thick layer of ice, this actually reduces the melting point as it provides a level of insulation from the much colder surface temperatures. And despite seemingly impossible, it makes the lake liquid. It's absolutely incredible. Number 10. Shipwreck of Shackleton's Endurance. Back in 2022, a group of scientists in Antarctica made a startling discovery that had remained hidden for over a century when they happened upon a shipwreck. But this wasn't any old shipwreck. No, this was the lost vessel of the explorer Ernest Shackleton that had sunk all the way back in 1915. The Anglo-Irish explorer Ernest Shackleton led 3 British expeditions to Antarctica in the early part of the 20th century. The ship labeled the Endurance had been crushed by sea ice and sunk in the Weddell Sea. Shackleton and his men had managed to make an escape in small boats and on foot. And until this recent discovery was made, nobody had known the exact whereabouts of the legendary boat. Videos were captured of the wreck site and appear to show the vessel is actually still in an extraordinarily good condition. It has likely been preserved by the cold waters and the fact that it's avoided being eaten by the sorts of critters that usually munch their way through wood. Well, it had been colonized by all types of other sea creatures, though, but had avoided the devastation of other wrecks that had been eaten by wood-angie worms. Now, remarkably, the ship looks a lot like the photographs that were taken of it when it was still in use. The hull is pretty much intact, and the ship sits upright at the bottom of the sea. The rigging is tangled, and the masts are down, but otherwise it is spookily in good shape. Number 9. Hidden colony of penguins. It may be the most sneaky bunch of penguins that's ever lived on planet Earth. Until 2018, a super colony of 1.5 million penguins had lived completely undetected by humans in this area of Antarctica. They were only discovered by chance when scientists were out examining some satellite images of this very remote and dangerous patch of land that is surrounded by sea ice in the place that is literally known as Danger Islands. These clever creatures have been living out there on the islands for almost 3,000 years, and it would take a NASA algorithm to see the telltale signs of life on the islands before people even noticed there was anything there at all. This place is quite difficult to get to, so people just never imagined that anything could ever live there. This type of penguin is native to Antarctica. These are one of the smallest penguin species, and that's probably why nobody could see them before on those satellite images, and they grow around to about 28 inches tall. They breed in large colonies and feed on krill, fish, and squid. Number 8. 17-pound meteorite. Here we are on an expedition to Antarctica with a group of scientists who have been very busy finding all kinds of meteorites on the frozen continent. They were out and about probing the surface of the Nils-Larsen blue ice zone near the Princess Elizabeth Station when they found one of the biggest space rocks that has ever been picked up in Antarctica. The monster rock was as big as a cantaloupe and weighed 16.7 pounds. Thrilling stuff. They also apparently found an additional 4 meteorites that were believed to have been sitting there for a few thousand years. 45,000 meteorites have been discovered in Antarctica over the years, and this big old fat one is unusual. Only about 100 of the previous discoveries have ever been this heavy. Now, I know it's just too exciting for words, and I can't even stand it myself, so we should just probably move swiftly on before I begin to get weird about it. Number 7. Ancient rainforest. Although it is kind of hard to imagine when you're looking at a frozen wasteland that is today's Antarctica, It was once a lush and great green forested region, which seems kind of weird. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was not covered in all of that snow and ice at all, but rather it was a temperate rainforest that was stuffed full of diverse living organisms. The latest research into the region has revealed a collection of fossil roots, spores, and pollen, which shows what sort of forest had once thrived in the region that we now know as Antarctica. During the Cretaceous period, which was between 145 million and 65 million years ago, the sea levels across the planet were 558 feet higher than they are today. The surface temperatures of the seas and tropics were as high as 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it was so hot that a rainforest grew in that area. The scientists pulled a sediment core from under the ice near Pine Island Glacier in the western part back in 2017. And analysis of that core has shown that the layer from about 90 million years ago was completely different in color to the rest of it. This was a sure sign that something was quite different about it at that time, that it had been in more recent epochs. And closer study upon the layer with CT imaging would reveal that the layer was a dense mixture of roots and soil, as well as a bunch of remains of flowering plants and prehistoric pollen and spores. It was a treasure trove of different climate and proof that the area had been a rainforest well before it had last frozen over. Number 6. Largest reptile egg. Back in 2020, scientists had finally managed to determine that an enormous egg was unearthed in Antarctica almost a decade previously, was in fact a kind of ancient reptile's egg. Up until that point, the object, which measured 11 inches by 7 inches, was being referred to as the thing, because nobody could say for sure what in the world it might have actually been, waiting to be identified. It had no name, but the mystery seems to have been solved, and the researchers are now saying that the fossil, which looks rather like a deflated football, was actually an egg that had once belonged to a massive sea reptile that had been around 68 million years ago. The eggs seemed to be most similar to those of lizards and snakes, but it was from an enormous prehistoric relative of these creatures. The size indicated that it must have belonged to an animal as big as a dinosaur, but otherwise it did not resemble a dinosaur egg in any other kind of way. It had a soft shell, which is like lizards and snakes today. But the size of the fossil indicated that the creature it belonged to must have at least been a fairly substantial 7 meters in length. The most likely candidate was a marine reptile called a mosasaur, but it may never be completely understood which exact species that it could have come from. Number 5. Antarctica's dry valleys. Now, weirdly for an area that is most famously associated with a lot of ice and snow, Antarctica is also home to some areas that are known as dry valleys. Here, there is almost no ice at all, and the dirt-covered arid land is scattered with rocks and boulders. Explorers who first stumbled across these valleys were stunned, describing them as deserts hidden inside the coldest place on Earth. In fact, the extreme dryness prevents even snow from settling, as strong katabatic winds sweep across the valleys at hurricane force, evaporating moisture before it can freeze. Scientists often compare the landscape to Mars, and NASA has even used the valleys to test rovers and life detection equipment before sending them to space. Within these barren stretches, ancient mummified seals have been discovered, carried inland by storms thousands of years ago, and perfectly preserved by the arid cold. The soil here is rich in salts and minerals that rarely dissolve, making it a natural archive of Earth's past climates. Despite the harshness, microbial life has been detected in some parts of the valleys, proving that life can adapt even in places that seem utterly inhospitable. For researchers, these strange valleys are a living laboratory, offering a glimpse into conditions that may mirror other worlds. There's an occasional frozen lake, and in the summer months you may briefly see a stream that links those lakes with the glaciers. The dry valleys cover an area of over 1,000 square miles. They are at a constantly low temperature. Apart from the teeny concession of liquid water in summer, there is almost no rain here, and there is a vast amount of salt accumulation. The dry valleys of Antarctica are more like Mars than they are like planet Earth. Number 4. New life in Antarctic ice. Lake Vostok is an absolutely massive lake in Antarctica that is covered by the Antarctic ice sheet. It's concealed beneath 13,100 feet of extremely thick ice. In fact, that is how it's been for millions of years. So what exactly might you find hidden away in a subglacial lake? Surely nothing much could exist in such a chilly temperature with no sunlight at all, right? Well, it turns out that some things can indeed live in such inhospitable conditions. Or at least that's what scientists believe is likely to be the case. Because of the size and weight of the Antarctic ice sheet, there's also an enormous amount of pressure that's been exerted on the water that lies beneath. And this adds yet another dimension to the possible life forms that may actually be found down there in this mysterious place. Now, when scientists began to test the ice, that's when they made quite a few discoveries. They can't actually get all the way down to have a look in the lake and get a bucket full of the stuff. The glacial archaeologists, and yes, that is an actual job, discovered more than 3,500 different DNA sequences that included bacteria and some things called eukaryotes and some archaea. But the spookiest thing that they discovered was that there were a whole load of organisms that didn't match up with anything else that exists in the known bank of genes. So then what can it be? Ancient life forms that have been trapped in time? Dinosaur DNA? Or maybe it's aliens? Yes, that'll be it because it's always aliens. Number 3. Missing wallet returned after 53 years. Paul Grisham lost his wallet all the way back in the 1960s when he was a meteorologist for the United States Navy in Antarctica. Now, naturally, he had gotten over that loss of his wallet and thought that he would never see it again. Antarctica is a rather remote place after all. So, he was super duper shocked when someone got in touch with him to say that the wallet had been discovered while they were doing some work at the McMurdo Research Station in Antarctica. Buddy, did you lose a wallet in the Antarctic? And he was amazed. McMurdo Station is a research facility located on the southern tip of Ross Island in Antarctica. Built in 1956, not only is it another in a long line of mundane-looking places, but like a handful of other stations, it's actually on an island named after a British naval officer by the name of Archibald McMurdo. Over the years, the station has grown into one of the largest and busiest research facilities in Antarctica. Of course, the primary functions of the station include the usual junk like glaciology, geology, biology, atmospheric science, and astronomy. The station also has its own airstrip known as Williams Field, which makes it easy to get in and out of, and also supply the team there with all the necessities needed in this modernized facility. The station has internet access, recreational facilities, and medical services to provide for the physical and mental health of its personnel. When the wallet was finally returned to Paul Grisham in San Diego, it still contained his Navy ID, his driver's license, a pocket reference for how to behave in an atomic attack or biological or chemical attack, as well as a beer ration card, some tax stuff, and some receipts. It's kind of crazy. Number 2. Blood Falls. The creepily named and kind of sinister-looking Blood Falls is a place in Antarctica that adds an interesting splash of color to the distinctly icy palette of snow and ice white. A dash of blood red. How very festive. This bizarre waterfall is located at the end of Taylor Glacier in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. And should you be passing through, but despite its appearance, it's not some hideous monster's abattoir waste pipe. Apparently, it's the result of a convergence of natural incidents that have wound up with the appearance of blood that's gushing from a glacier. Back in 1911, when the falls were first discovered by an Australian geologist named Griffith Taylor, he attributed the phenomenon to red algae, but he was incorrect. The liquid actually turns out to be so rich in iron that when it reaches the surface and hits the air, it oxidizes. This is the same process that occurs to iron when it rusts and goes to a reddish color. Spends time at the surface. That's when it becomes oxidized and leaves this beautiful red color around. The glacier and its briny discharge have recently become the focus of close studies that's led scientists to conclude that the blood-red liquid is a brine that originated in this ocean, but has gone through a whole bunch of changes as it interacts with rocks on its way to becoming the falls at the terminus of the Taylor Glacier. Sorry to disappoint all you vampires who were hoping for a bloodbath. It's just a load of boring old rock juice after all. Number 1. Giant sea spiders. Giant Antarctic sea spiders are probably not exactly one for the arachnophobes out there, but they have fascinated scientists for the past century and a half. These giant Antarctic sea spiders have an especially unique way to protect their eggs. Unlike other species of sea spider, these ones don't only carry their eggs around until they hatch. Instead, the males painstakingly attach clusters of the tiny eggs to the rocky seafloor, carefully anchoring them so the currents don't sweep them away. Divers who have witnessed this behavior describe the sight as both eerie and mesmerizing, as hundreds of delicate white spheres, the ocean floor like scattered pearls. The frigid waters provide a natural incubator, slowing the development of the embryos, but offering them protection from many predators. Still, the eggs are vulnerable, and some small fish and starfish have been seen attempting to snack on them, forcing the parent spiders to guard their brood aggressively. This unusual method of external egg-laying has baffled researchers, since most sea spiders prefer to keep their eggs close at all times. One theory suggests that the extreme cold forces these giants to spread the risk across larger areas, ensuring at least some offspring survive. Another fascinating detail is that these sea spiders can pump oxygen directly through their legs, bypassing the need for lungs, which helps sustain them while they remain nearly motionless over their eggs for long periods. For scientists, these peculiar reproductive habits shed light on how polar creatures adapt to one of Earth's harshest environments. The giant sea spiders attach their tiny eggs to the seafloor. Although most sea spiders only grow to be about an inch long, these giant ones can have leg spans as large as 20 inches. This is apparently as the result of something known as polar gigantism, which can cause the species at the polar extremities of the Earth to become much larger than their counterparts that are elsewhere on the planet. That wraps up today's chilling expedition into Antarctica's harsh and mysterious landscape. Which of these discoveries captured your imagination the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out the other fascinating videos appearing on your screen. I'll see you next time.